Well, hello, everyone. We're just going to get started. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. Welcome to the Braveboy Climate Summit here at BSU. Thank you for your commitment to the cause and your attention for our next session. My name is Michael Pistoninzi. I'm a project manager for urban forestry with Prince George's County Public Works and Transportation, facilitating the Right Tree, Right Place program. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel on accelerating climate action through interagency partnerships, mapping heat islands to improve equity, health, and environmental outcomes. In this federal-local partnership, federal satellite data has been used to map surface temperatures throughout Prince George's County over time. In turn, the Departments of the Environment, Health, and Public Works and Transportation utilize these data to inform policy and investment decisions on tree planting, stormwater management, and health assessments. Today, we will discuss the potential future applications for surface temperature data modeling in all three departments. Please join me in welcoming our panel. First up, we have Debra Collier. She is the senior epidemiologist with the Prince George's County Health Department, where she leads analytical efforts across multiple public health programs and divisions. Debra leads and collaborates on analysis for population health reports, grant narratives, community health needs assessments, community health improvement plans, strategic planning initiatives, and a wide range of ad hoc projects critical to countywide public health strategy. So welcome, Debra. Thank you. Next up, we have Mary Abe. Mary is the Deputy Associate Director with the Sustainability Division of the Prince George's County Department of Environment. As a landscape architect for over 35 years, she has been a business owner, nonprofit leader, and now a public servant with Prince George's County. She was pivotal to developing the Prince George's County Climate Action Plan, which the County Council adopted in July 2022. Beyond her climate action work, her expertise encompasses environmental site design, including the county's first channel restoration project and the first regenerative stormwater conveyance. With DOE Sustainability Division, Mary's team manages the County Urban Tree Program, now annually on track to plant thousands of trees within the municipalities, HOAs, and churches, climate resilient stormwater management, and modeling projects, the County Master Gardeners Program, and the USDA Advanced Markets for Producer Grant for County Farmers. She is a tireless advocate for the natural world, focusing her efforts on developing financial and behavioral initiatives for the public and private implementation in sustainability practices and natural resource protection. Next up, we have Joanna Smith. Let's clap for Mary. Welcome. Next up, we have Joanna Smith. Joanna is a transformative leader in public works, stormwater infrastructure, and fleet operations. She is the Associate Director of the Office of Storm Drain Management within Prince George's County Department of Public Works and Transportation. With nearly 20 years' experience in environmental engineering, infrastructure management, and operational strategy, she has been at the forefront of modernizing public sector fleet stormwater systems to enhance efficiency, sustainability, and climate resilience. Let's welcome Joanna, please. And last but not least, we have Dr. Stephanie Schollaert, adjunct scientist, UMD Earth Systems Science Interdisciplinary Center, leading activities to advance science applications using the Earth observing satellite data. Dr. Schollaert leads projects that help federal, state, and local partners apply NASA environmental data to their decisions, building resilience with practitioners across the state of Maryland. She also applies her expertise to water quality challenges, working to develop new satellite data products through collaboration with resource managers around the Chesapeake Bay. She previously served as a meteorology and oceanography officer in the United States Navy. She has a PhD in atmospheric and oceanic sciences from the University of Maryland and an MS in physical oceanography from the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island, and a BS in oceanography from the U.S. Naval Academy. Let's welcome Dr. Stephanie Schollaert. Our panel here, each speaker will have an opportunity to present a little bit of the work. We will follow up with some of these pre-submitted questions, and if time permits, we can open up the questions to the audience. So I believe Dr. Stephanie Schollaert is our first presenter, and I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the organizers of this meeting. And I understand we need to end sharply at 1:45, so I'm going to power through the slides that I've prepared. But basically, this think globally, act locally, I know it's an old expression, but it sort of encapsulates when we work with satellite data, because our view of Earth from space is we have all these different Earth observing systems, and we see the Earth as a system. And these satellites are measuring everything from gases in the atmosphere to groundwater below the Earth's surface. And then in particular, when we decided we wanted to work with the county, or when we got funded by NASA to work with the county to help with them building resilience, we got together with Mary Abe and her team. And one of the first things we decided to work on was helping with the heat mapping. There was a story by WUSA Channel 9 that is a screenshot there early on in our work together. We started in 2024. And these are the satellites in particular that we used in this study. I'm going to give a brief description, and then we'll talk about how we connected it. We linked it to the health data, which Debra will talk about. But the satellites we focused on for this study measured temperature as well as land cover, land use. And so we were able to take, we did 2 different data sets, and we did some analysis by University of Maryland and NASA Goddard scientists, and then some analysis was led by the county, Charles Brace, and the contractor, Courtney Gustafson. So this is what the University of Maryland and NASA Goddard study looked at, which was 20 years of temperature data. On the left-hand side, you see the satellite average summer temperatures over the whole 20-year time series, with the red areas, which are inside the Beltway, being noticeably hotter for the land surface temperature than the areas outside the Beltway. And then we compared those, the time series of those, because we have one of those for just about every single day of the whole 20 years. We averaged them over every month, and we compared those to the air temperatures. You can see the locations of the air temperature data, which are sparse. So it really helps to have the satellite data to give you the whole picture of what's happening, both in space and time. But on the right-hand side, you see for those 4 different in situ stations, the orange is the average of the satellite data, and then the black is the temperature measured at the station. And they compare well, but you'll notice they're not always complete. So some of the station data started late or ended early, and so you really need continuous data to understand what's happening, what are the trends in heat, and what are the hot areas. So the county led this part of the study. Charles and Courtney did this. And the map on the left, this is using the Landsat data, which is higher spatial resolution. It shows over the whole county, areas in red or orange are the intensifying and heating, and then yellow shows some of the historical heating. On the right-hand side is simply county-owned land that has temperature trends. And so the county figured that, they don't have jurisdiction over private land, but over the county land, and notably the area circled is the landfill. That's an area identified as having a heating trend where the county could take action to build resilience. And then we compared it to health data, and Debra will talk a little bit more about this, but we calculated heat stress over these years that we had the health data, so that the top histogram shows the heat stress, and the yellow is cautionary, and then the red shows, above the extreme caution for heat stress or dangerous. And then the red histogram on the bottom shows the emergency room visits for the heat as the chief complaint. So when people feel heat stress and they go to the urgent care or the emergency department, those are the comparisons. And there was a press release about this study, and then we wrote it up in a paper that's publicly available at the link below, as well as providing resources to help people analyze the data. So on the right-hand side, you see the publicly available heat product guide for accessing the data, and then the lower one is the GIS sort of cookbook or toolbook that Charles and Courtney authored. And Charles also presented that at the Esri user conference, where all the GIS people go to share best practices. So that is sort of our initial work together, and I wanted to mention that there are a lot of public data. The advantage of government data is it's publicly accessible. The disadvantage is because it's publicly accessible, there could be a lot of places that you have to look. But there are resources to help guide people in finding the data that you need and then in learning how to use it. So there's also training and other tools available from that NASA Earth data. Another resource that the federal government is trying to do is bring all of the relevant data together under earth.gov. This is NASA, NOAA, USGS, EPA, NIST, a bunch of different agencies, and they're starting with these 9 themes. And I just want to show you one example that I plotted from there. I grabbed the future temperature projections for the number of days above 90 degrees for Prince George's County. So you can see on the map, I outlined Prince George's County, and then on the right, it shows the number of days above 90 degrees for the middle of the road climate projection models. And you can see there's projected to be more days above 90 degrees going forward over the next 50 years. There's also data pathfinders, so air quality and other data sets are available. And I think that's about it for me for now, and we'll hand it over to Mary to go next. So press down.
Advance.
Up. Advance, press down.
Oh,
down.
Oh, it's just the opposite. Hi there. Good afternoon. Okay, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but just in a nutshell, the reason that DOE got involved in this was because we are dedicated to environmental mission of helping put trees in, environmental resources and things like that, protecting it. So when we started working with NASA for the heat study, I was very centric to how could we apply this to our tree canopy in the county. And in particular, DOE's mission is to work with the municipalities, HOAs, and churches in our county. And so this is really about inside the Beltway for the purposes of this presentation. Let's see. I think I've lost my... There we go. Oh, looks like I flipped a little too far. The one thing that I want to be clear about how we use this, and really the truth is that the satellite data from a heat study is very coarse. And so really boiling down and trying to find a location to put a specific tree, this is not what this tool is really for. But what it is, it shows land patterns and land cover changes. And what's really important to note is the NASA brand. And that is what really caught our attention, because we could literally go and we could say to somebody, if you can see it from satellite, then something's really happening. And so that was a big value to it, is the NASA brand. So I'm just going to quickly go through this because I know we're short on time. What we did is we actually did some comparisons of tree canopy study and then heat island. And then sure enough, we haven't had the time to really go back and look at the loss of tree canopy and then overlay it with the heat studies, but pretty much I'm sure that there's going to be that correlation. And what I'm showing here, what I'm trying to show is that when you try to boil it down and you try to see what the different patterns mean at the coarse level of this heat study, on the, on the top right, you can see that big red dot up at the top. Well, that's a black roof, and that's really hot. And I mean, it's common sense, but people just don't even realize it. And if you were to look at the aerials there, you would see a bunch of white roofs, and that there's no red dot there. And then on the other one, ironically, that's a stormwater pond. It's water, and it's hot. This one is, well, this is kind of obvious. This is, oscillating cold. This was interesting to me because this is showing what happens with trees on streets. And up at the top, you'll see these are cold spots, and down here, it's just kind of getting a little bit hotter. And this is what's really in those spots. So this is kind of giving you a feel. To the left, that community was built in 1989, and look at the lack of trees. And then you have, built in 1993, there's a few more trees. And this is all inside the Beltway. And I think it's really important to note, too, it's not because the county doesn't want to put trees in there, there's just no space to put trees in there. Between curbs, gutters, utilities, and things like that, that's what makes it difficult. And then this is outside the Beltway, built in 2008. There's a lot more trees. And so that's why when you start to talk about inequity in the county as far as trees are concerned, there's a definite difference between the tree canopy inside the Beltway and outside the Beltway. And then my final point really is that all the things with the urban heat island, what we found out is that we have to do ground truthing. The coarseness of the satellite data gives us an indication of pattern, but really the next steps here are to do citizen science and engage our communities in actually taking temperatures and finding out what's really going on to the ground to tie it back to NASA. And then how we use the urban heat study is we actually have a tree equity map that helps guide where we're going to be putting our trees in, and it's based on tree canopy percentage and tree loss. And then that's kind of showing a close-up of our tree equity mapping tool and how we start to use it. Joanna?
Good afternoon. You're all sleepy today. All right, well, I'll try to make it quick too, so I might skip on some of my slides too. I'm going backwards. Am I? I see. It is. All right. So I'm going to start, in order for this to make sense, I'm going to start with asking how many of you have heard of Office of Storm Drain Maintenance? Well, besides the people I work with. All right. Exactly. All right. So who we are. Our office is actually the public side of the environmental side in the county. So our office deals with all the design, construction, management, operation, and maintenance of all stormwater infrastructure that is public in the county. That it's a lot. So I put those numbers in there. You can kind of read them through it. But we have over 900 ponds, 900 miles of storm drain, 23 classified dams, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Well, a lot of the things that we deal with is flooding, right? As you all probably have experienced over the past 10 years, we have had more repeated flooding, a lot of intensified rains with a lot of rainfall in a short period of time. I think the past 5 years probably were the most severe that we have seen in many years. If you can see in those, I highlighted the ones that we had in 2020, 2022. We had storms that were 100, 200, 500-year storms, right? So when we talked about the heat islands, it's counterintuitive, right? Like you think it makes sense, but we wanted to make sure we had the data. One of the ones that was actually very critical to us was January 22nd. We had over 4 inches of rain in a 6-hour period. So if you look on that little chart over there that we highlighted, that was a 200-year storm in a 4-hour period. Majority of it happened right within the Beltway, right? As you can see, that purple line, purple area, shaded area, that's where the centralized area was that got hit the most. All right, going. So we have data. Now what? NASA came on board, and Charles, a great colleague of mine, brought it to my attention and said, hey, we have all this information about the heat islands. How can we use it? Well, at the same time, DPW&T was working on a blue spot data to try to find out the areas that tend to flood the most. We wanted to know if there was any correlation between the two data sets. Ding, 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 there was. All right, there is almost 13,000, actually it's more than 13,000 acres in Prince George's County that are in the heat area within our EJ zones, our environmental justice zone 80, and about 26% of that is actually flood prone. So we wanted to know, how do we go about planning? How do I go about fixing? As leaders in the county, our job is to be ahead of the curve. Our job is to ensure that we are protecting our citizens and not waiting for something to happen to then protect our citizens. So we went back to the drawing table with Charles once again. Everybody's gonna know Charles soon. And we plotted the data. We took the 10 worst areas of the heat spots with the 10 worst areas in the flood blue spots area. And then we did a weighted ranking average with their GIS tools to actually normalize the census data as well, because we wanted to make it as even as possible. So density, we use population density to do that. With that, we were able to find the 10 worst locations in the county that absolutely need assistance when it comes to flooding, heat, and other vulnerabilities that they have. So we then also check, well, do we have infrastructure in this area? Well, purple rain came about, but that's why it's red, purple. So Charles and I talked about how do we check usually for rain. We normally say, you know, very low, moderate, we start kind of yellow, and then we kind of increase it. And when it gets to purple, we're in severe problems. So that's where purple rain came about. So it's a joke internal. We started looking into these areas, and we started looking that those 10 areas also do not have water quality or water quantity controls, right? So this is where we all need to start looking into it, right? So how do we go about moving in the future? Do we follow the same typical process that we always follow, a reactive process of somebody call, somebody just has an issue, and that is how we do and spend our dollars? Or do we go into a planning project and we start looking into a more proactive approach, reaching to those areas, evaluating those areas, planning those areas, doing projects that will target multiple issues, whether it's tree canopy, flooding, water quality, and any other issues that we may have. One of the things that we actually have learned under this ICC was emergency response teams like fire and EMT, they actually track this data too. Yet we do not have that information that could help us develop those projects in the future so we can maximize the funding that we have available. So in that, this is actually one of the projects that we found out using that information. There was a pipe. It was crushed. Wonder why they flooded. So one of the things that we're doing in our projects right now is actually using this information to target more of those areas, using the data that we just found on those 10 worst areas in the county to plan CIP projects for the next 10 years. So that is my part of the information. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and let's continue to break those silos. Debra, your turn.
Down, right?
Down arrow.
Oh, you have to go back to the other side. Uh-oh. So you do something wrong? Technical difficulties.
Down arrow?
Yeah.
Is that working?
That was what I was pushing.
Can you push the up arrow?
Where's the catch? The rest
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Which one's your side?
Oh. Scroll up. Let me scroll down. Oh. Scroll up.
It should start from here.
That's Stephanie's, yeah. So maybe it's below Stephanie's. Oop. Can you scroll up? Yeah, right here. We're doing great.
Which one is it?
Keep going. Right there. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Yeah. Down. Down. Nope. It's okay. Yeah, it's not. Okay, wonderful. Yep, that's it. Let's keep moving. Um, thank you all for bearing with me. One of the slides I think that came before this was actually just kind of a recap of what Stephanie already mentioned about our collaboration. That one right there. So essentially, like Stephanie, just to recap what she had mentioned, was that this was a collaborative study between NASA's Earth Science Division, as well as our health department and Department of Environment. And so this was a really great opportunity for us to kind of work together and be able to see what we could do as a team, and utilizing this satellite data that NASA was able to provide to us. And so what you see up there is the map that Stephanie's already mentioned, but these other two graphs that she mentioned as well just outline what we're seeing with heat-related illnesses. So with this data, we weren't able to necessarily utilize, we had some limitations with looking at chronic diseases such as like childhood asthma and things like that, that kind of link back to what Joanna was mentioning with our environmental justice type of data. So we weren't able to utilize the data for those purposes just because of the coarseness of the data, as well as the timing of the data. Chronic diseases are very, in terms of progression, it's really hard to match that to and show causation with temperature data. So there's so many other factors that can play a role in that. But with heat-related illness, we could do that. And so we utilized our Essence system to be, in Essence is again a syndromic surveillance system that we utilized to pull the data of emergency department and urgent care visits. And that allowed us to kind of map that and compare that to what we were seeing with some of the satellite data, the land surface temperature data. And then this is just a little bit about the about Essence. I'm sorry, I can't really see it here, but a little bit about Essence. Again, it's just our syndromic surveillance system is a state-based syndromic surveillance system, and it again it actually provides information about emergency room visits as well as urgent care visits. And again, we pulled data looking at our heat-related illnesses, and those were based on ICD-10 codes from the National Syndromic Surveillance System program. And so that just kind of gives you a little bit of information about that. And then just wanted to let you know, I guess in terms of just making sure that we kind of link this back to the study and the opportunities that we could utilize this moving forward. Some of the limitations that have already been mentioned here by Mary was that because of the coarseness of the data, it is a little bit difficult when looking at public health data that is a lot of times categorized by zip code, census tract, and things like that. The data is so coarse, down to, like 30, I think just, yeah, 30 meters. And so I think because it's so coarse, it's very difficult to pinpoint and utilize our public health data to be able to utilize it in that way. But there are other ways that we can utilize this wonderful information and be able to plan better in terms of health outcomes. Thank you.
Excellent. I would like to acknowledge this all-female panel with another round of applause. Their work addressing the using this data that is made available by NASA to look at the intersectionality of environment, social, and health, and how it affects all of us in the county. I do have a couple questions we can get through. We have about 10 minutes to get through some questions. One that was submitted was when you guys were looking at your data, was there anything surprising that jumped out to you? Like right now, when you said that, Mary, when you said that the water was actually very hot, was surprising to me. So when you guys were analyzing your data through a health perspective or through a environment perspective, was there anything that jumped out to you that was surprising, that didn't meet what you thought was just going to happen? There might be a microphone there. Does it work? That's okay.
Here we go. The things that, well, number one, it did surprise me that the coarseness of the data didn't really relate to the level of detail that we wanted, because we were dealing with NASA. Now, truthfully, NASA has the capacity probably to see down to where the ants are walking, but it wasn't it wasn't publicly available. But that was one of the biggest surprises. And the other thing that I would say that we did see from a pattern is some of the hot spots that are involving, unfortunately, are our schools and churches. Those you can actually see, and that's just something to really take note of. But other than that,
I'll mention on the issue of coarseness, the government data are limited to go 10 meters spatial resolution is the limit, because below that is the domain of private sector. So there's all sorts of private sector companies, like probably hear on the news Planet and Maxar and all these companies launching satellites now. They see it as a business opportunity to have that high resolution data. So they're getting down to the 1 meter and finer. They can measure, license plates. Yeah, so the publicly available government data is 10 meters or coarser through this agreement.
Any other thoughts that you guys noticed about the data?
It wasn't so much a surprise. I think it was just we had used and so we did some causal analysis using NOAA data. Looking at heat-related illnesses from that perspective, and one of the things that I think wasn't necessarily surprising, but I think it was just super helpful to be able to look at this data from a county perspective. I think some of the work that Charles did in highlighting the heat maps was really helpful in terms of planning from an environmental perspective when we're thinking about cooling centers and things like that. From an emergency preparedness perspective, it was super helpful for that. And I think that's the usefulness of this data moving forward. And I think that wasn't necessarily surprising, but I think it was definitely helpful.
For Public Works, it was interesting to see that the same areas that we get the heaviest amount of rain are also the hottest spots, right? And there are studies showing that, we're going to continue to have those intensified areas. We're going to continue to have about 35% more days of over 2 inches of rain, in the studies due to climate change. But for us, it was actually very helpful for the same reason of emergency response, because we have to activate for rain events. So it was easier. It was not just we go here because we always do. We actually have data to show why we were in a specific area deployed to prepare for those main events.
Let's see if it worked here. Excellent, thank you. We had another question submitted here, and it came up a little bit. I thought about this too, the ground truthing, and what is the significance of, or the strengths and limitations of the Earth observing satellite data, and why is ground truthing measurement so significant?
So satellite data are measured up from space about 700 kilometers up above the surface of the Earth. And in between the satellite and the ground, there's the atmosphere. And so you have to subtract the atmosphere in order to get the measurement of what's happening on the ground. And sometimes there's obvious clouds that are easy to subtract, but that means you have missing data. But sometimes there's very thin, wispy clouds, and those are missed, and then you have a cool anomaly. So if you read our paper, you'll see that if the temperature was more than 2 standard deviations cooler than the rest of the data, we assumed those were cloud contaminated and removed those data. But those are the kinds of things you have to think about. So the ground truth data are essential for verifying that your satellite data is reasonable and trustworthy.
Excellent. As an arborist, I'm always thinking about that, the temperatures of the leaves versus the ground underneath, and is a good point to be made. We do have some more pre-submitted questions, but we only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to open it up to the audience, get a little bit more interactive. If anybody has a question, I'm welcome to take it. I saw your hand up first. If you're loud enough, you can yell.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the panelists for speaking. As you know, trees are wonderful at reducing temperature for our heat islands, as well as retaining stormwater. But I'm very surprised that in the county, there's very little maintenance done on the trees, and particularly when it comes to mulching. I find all over the county, there's these volcano mulching that's done in the county, particularly in the right-of-ways. I've talked about it to Public Works. Other people have. I'm wondering if you're committed to making sure our trees are as healthy as possible by proper mulching techniques, and if contractors are doing the mulching, tying fines to each tree that's improperly mulched.
Intriguing. All right, well, I will tell you that the gentleman running right now over there, he brought up the same question. So our Right Tree, Right Place program with DPWNT, we ensure that we don't do that. The hiccup that we're having is when the HOAs are doing some of their beautification, and we see that mound of mulch, right, which actually is not helping. So one of the things that we literally just talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, was to actually put educational information out so that we can provide that to our landscapers in the county as well as the HOAs so that they can follow the best practices to ensure that. As for fees, that will be more of a deep high, but intriguing, like I said.
You had your hand up, I thought?
I guess this would be for all of you. Would you think that something like a bottle return bill, like some states have, where they encourage plastic bottles to be returned, would be something that the county would be interested in taking a look at?
Well, as it relates to urban heat islands, I can't really answer that, but I do know that I know the county in the past has probably looked at supporting that. Does anybody have a question about the urban heat island mapping?
I'm coming.
It's not so much what we have used as what we want to use. We actually have infrared cameras that we can put. They're not that expensive, and put it on an iPad or an iPhone. And what it does is it gives you the not only the temperature, but it's a really effective tool. That one slide that I had, that you can actually see the difference in the heat. And what's really fascinating that people need to understand is that lawn is just about as hot as asphalt. And so, and the same is true with mulch. And I want to make a comment about that mulch. We're actually going to try to pilot on our upcoming plantings at least 200 trees. We're going to try the choir, I guess, mats as opposed to mulch, and really try to get away from mulching, because mulching is really only needed for a year. And people really think that they're doing a really great service. And in many times, we just recently peeled back mulch on one of our trees in a park that we had planted. It was almost 8 inches of mulch up on the tree after 2 years. And it's really well intended, but we just need to get away from the thought about mulch. So we're trying to look for alternatives that could perhaps be used, especially in right-of-way plantings.
Excellent. Did you have one?
I think I want to direct this. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think I want to direct this to Mary, I believe. Up in Laurel, near 197 and the Parkway, there's a large area that has actually been it was forested. It's been totally cleared. I'm wondering if there is regulations in terms of how much needs to be preserved in terms of the tree cover, or it was just clear cut. And I looked at that and I thought, this was just terrible, but I didn't know what the situation was in terms of this.
Honestly, that sounds like a site-specific situation, and really that you almost have to go back and look at the parcel of the land and find out what site plan has been approved. And unfortunately, when you see trees cleared, those trees were probably docketed for clearing probably 3 years ago. And so it just didn't happen overnight. So that's what I would say to you, is go back and look at the parcel and see who owns it, and then find the plan.
Thank you. I believe this will be our last question because of time. Of course, if you want to yell, yeah.
This is more for NASA, I guess. I have done some consulting where other jurisdictions are starting to work with reflective pavement. And I wanted to know, does that work? Since you do
that absolutely does work. And we talked about that early on, but the county had a hard time getting permission to do the reflective paint. There's colleagues out in California who've done that in Los Angeles area, and they've proved that you can have 10 degrees cooler, 2 adjacent streets, one with the reflective coating and one not. You can have 10 degrees cooler, actually 10 degrees Celsius, so like 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler with the reflective paint. And they have learned over the years how to make it so that it's not glaring in drivers' eyes. So I got the recommendations from them and shared it with Mary, and she requested it, but it hadn't been approved. So then we talked to the University of Maryland to see if they could do it. Then they wanted to reach out to the Commanders Stadium, because that part of the challenge at University of Maryland is you could do a parking lot, but then you've got a lot of cars on it, and that is going to make it harder to see a temperature difference. But the Commanders Stadium lot, they were figuring, would be empty most of the time when there's no games. But I sort of lost track. We had not had permission at that point. So now there's been 2 summers that have passed that we didn't get to test that out, but we would love to do that if you have any insight on how to get permission to do that somewhere. It does work.
Well, I know there are local jurisdictions that are doing it. I can talk to both of you after. I wanted to say too, so it seems like schools, churches, shopping centers, because of the large roof areas, if that were lightened up, perhaps that temperature could drop.
Just a note about for the climate action plan, it actually has light paint as one of the recommendations in the priority recommendations. So it is on the radar screen in the climate action plan for the county. And again, I'm sure that we can find a way to pilot something like that.
Excellent. Great questions, everybody. I want to give another round of applause to our fantastic panel. Beautiful example of the intersectionality of the work that satellites can give us, the data, and then how it can be distributed to our local government through health or through the environment or through public infrastructure, and how it can help benefit all of us. So thank you guys so much for your attention.